Chapter 2. Seeing somebody is inconvenient. That was the first thing I learned after the hallway. Not a noble lesson. Not a pretty one. I wish I could tell you my conscience woke up like some movie hero sitting straight up in bed, suddenly aware of right and wrong and ready to throw punches for justice. It didn't. I slept fine that night. I ate Pop-Tarts the next morning. I complained because my mom bought the unfrosted kind again, like that was a real problem. But once I had seen her, I kept seeing her. That was the inconvenient part. Before the hallway, Davis had been part of the background noise of Cooper's Ridge High, a name people said with a certain smirk, a body moving fast between classes, a soft voice under louder ones. I knew she existed, obviously. You can't spend 10 years in a school system with somebody and not know they exist. But there's knowing a person exists, Sue, and then there's noticing the exact way their hand tightens around a backpack strap when certain boys come around the corner. After the hallway, I noticed that she got to school early but didn't go inside until the first wave of buses had already emptied. I noticed that she took the long way to biology if Tyler's friends were hanging near the vending machines. I noticed that she never used the main staircase after lunch. I noticed that when teachers said, "Find a partner," her eyes went nowhere at all, like she had already trained herself not to want what she wasn't going to get. And I noticed the hair. It was hard not to. Not because it was strange, though that's what people wanted to call it. It wasn't. It just kept getting longer. Slowly, stubbornly, like a secret growing in public. By October, it brushed her shoulders if she didn't tuck it behind her ears. Some days it looked damp in the morning, combed flat and careful. Some days, if the air was humid, it waved a little at the ends. She never wore it in a ponytail then. That would have been too much, I guess. Too obvious. Or maybe she wanted to, and wasn't ready. Or maybe I'm putting meaning on things I had no right to understand yet. Back then, I just knew it made people talk. "Davis needs a haircut," Mason said one morning while we stood outside Coach Dempsey's office waiting for the locker room to open. Tyler laughed. "Davis needs a lot of things." I remember staring at the bulletin board across the hall. Track schedule, basketball tryouts, a flyer for the fall blood drive. Somebody had written "Call Jenny for a good time" on the corner in blue pen, and somebody else had crossed out the phone number, but not the words. "Maybe he lost a bet," Mason said. There it was. The wrong word, dropped casually, the way everyone dropped it then. I didn't know to wince at it yet. Not really. But something in me snagged on it anyway, like fabric catching on a nail. Tyler grinned. Or maybe he wants to be homecoming queen. The guys laughed. I didn't. Again, I used that as evidence in my own defense. Not laughing became this private little medal I pinned to myself. See? I wasn't like them. I wasn't cruel. I just stood there while cruelty happened 3 feet away from me and kept my face neutral. A hero, really. Coach Dempsey opened the locker room door before I had to decide whether to say something. That happened a lot in those days. A bell rang. A teacher walked in. A door opened. Some interruption arrived just in time for me to pretend choice had been taken out of my hands. "Barnes," Coach said, pointing at me. "You got your physical form in?" "Yeah, Coach." "Good. Indoor season's gonna sneak up on us." Tyler groaned. "It's October. And you're still slow," Coach said without looking at him. Everyone laughed, including me. That was easier. Running had started as something I was good at and turned into a place I could hide. People think hiding looks like crouching in corners or disappearing into crowds, but sometimes hiding looks like being the fastest thing anyone can see. I could spend a whole afternoon on the track with my lungs burning and my legs shaking, and nobody would ask me what I thought about anything. They'd ask my time, they'd ask if my hamstring was tight, they'd ask if I could anchor the relay. Simple questions, safe questions. That fall, even though track wasn't officially in season, Coach kept a small group of us after school twice a week for conditioning. It was legal, he said, as long as he called it optional. In Cooper's Ridge, optional meant your parents would ask why you weren't doing it if you wanted to win. So I ran. Through September heat, through October wind, past the football field where the grass was always chewed up by cleats, past the bleachers where couples sat after school pretending they weren't waiting for the parking lot to clear, past the chain link fence where kids cut across the edge of school property if they didn't want to walk by the front office. I didn't see Davis out there then. Not yet. Or if I did, I didn't know to remember. The first time I saw her somewhere other than a hallway, it was in English. Mrs. Albright's room smelled like coffee and dry erase markers. She had posters on the wall with quotes from dead people and one hand-lettered sign above the whiteboard that said, "Words matter," which was the kind of thing adults put up when they wanted to believe the room itself was doing moral work. We were reading short stories that month. I don't remember which one that day. Something about a family, maybe. Something where everybody said one thing and meant something else, which described most of sophomore year as far as I could tell. I sat 2 rows from the back by the windows. Mason sat behind me and spent most of class drawing shoes in the margins of his notebook. Davis sat near the door. That was another thing I noticed after the hallway. She almost always sat where leaving would be easy. Mrs. Albright had us answer questions out loud, which was her version of fun and our version of mild public execution. Usually the same 5 kids answered. Amy Trask, because she knew everything and wanted us to know she knew it. Benji Miller, because he liked hearing himself build an argument. Me, sometimes, because teachers enjoyed proving athletes could read. A couple others depending on the day. Davis almost never raised her hand. That day, Mrs. Albright asked why the main character didn't tell the truth earlier. Nobody answered right away. It was last period. The light coming through the windows had gone flat and gold. Somewhere outside, maintenance was mowing, and the hum of it pressed against the glass. Everybody was tired. Even Amy Trask had her chin in her palm like knowledge had become heavy. Mrs. Albright looked around the room. Come on. Why stay quiet when telling the truth would solve the problem? There was a pause. Then, Davis said, because telling the truth doesn't solve the problem if the problem is what people do after they hear it. The room went still in a funny way. Not silent. A classroom is never silent. There were still pencils moving, chairs creaking, somebody coughing, but attention shifted. Not toward Mrs. Albright, toward Davis. She hadn't raised her hand. She had just said it. Mrs. Albright blinked once, then smiled like she had been given exactly the answer she wanted. That's very good, she said. Can you say more? Davis's face changed, only a little. But I saw it. For 1 second, she had looked almost surprised at herself, like the words had slipped out faster than fear could stop them. Then everyone looked at her, and the walls went back up. She shrugged. No? A few people laughed under their breath, not because it was funny exactly, but because refusing a teacher always counted as entertainment. Mrs. Albright didn't push. Maybe she knew better. Maybe she just didn't want to lose the thread. Well, she said, turning back to the board, that's still the heart of it. The class moved on. I didn't. I kept looking at the side of Davis's face. That answer stayed with me in a way I couldn't explain. Because it was smart, yes, but not in the Amy Trask way, all polished and eager. It sounded like something pulled from a place no teacher had assigned. It sounded like Davis knew more about truth than the rest of us and hated that she did. Mason leaned forward and whispered, Davis got deep. I should have ignored him. Instead, because I was 16 and allergic to sincerity, I whispered, guess so. Mason snorted. Davis didn't turn around. I don't know if she heard us. I hope she didn't. That's a useless hope. The past doesn't improve because you feel bad later. After class, Mrs. Albright kept us an extra 30 seconds because she believed the bell did not dismiss us. She did, which was one of those teacher sayings that felt ancient even then. When she finally let us go, everyone surged toward the door. Davis waited. Not politely, strategically. She let the first crush pass before she stood. Tyler was in the hallway. Of course he was. He had a talent for appearing exactly where he could make a place worse. He was leaning against the lockers with 2 guys from his shop class, laughing about something on his phone. When Davis stepped out, one of them nudged Tyler. Tyler looked up. Well, if it isn't Princess Deep Thoughts. Davis's shoulders tightened. I was right behind her. Close enough to see it happen. Close enough that if I had kept walking, I would have had to pass between them. Tyler tilted his head. You writing poetry now? Move, Davis said. Same word as before. Move. I don't know if she knew how often she said it. I don't know if she knew how much of her life in that school could be boiled down to that one demand. Move. Get out of my way. Let me through. Let me exist in the space you think belongs to you. Tyler smiled. Say please. A few people slowed down. I felt that same heat crawl up my neck. My backpack strap dug into my shoulder. My English book was in one hand. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably a text from Mom asking whether I needed picked up after conditioning. Normal life insisting on itself. Davis stared at Tyler. She was shorter than him. Not tiny, just smaller in the way almost everyone was smaller than Tyler, who had hit his growth spurt early and made it everybody's problem. Her hair had fallen forward again, hiding part of her face. Please move, she said. Tyler's grin widened like she had given him exactly what he wanted. There you go, princess. I hated him then. For about 3 seconds, I hated him clearly. That should have been enough. It wasn't. I stepped around them, not between them. Around. I told myself I was late. I told myself I had conditioning. I told myself Davis had handled it, hadn't she? Tyler moved after she said please. She got through. It was over. I told myself a lot of things that year. Most of them were designed to keep my hands clean. I made it halfway down the hall before I looked back. Davis was walking the other direction, books against her chest, hair swinging near her jaw. Tyler was laughing with his friends. Mrs. Albright's door was still open behind them. Nobody came out. I went to conditioning. Coach had us doing repeat 300s, which are proof that adults can hate children even while claiming to mentor them. The first few felt good. I liked the turn, the slingshot feeling of coming out of the curve into the straightaway, arms pumping, breath sharp, the track opening ahead of me like a dare. By the 4th, my lungs burned. By the 6th, my legs went rubbery. By the 8th, I wasn't thinking about Davis or Tyler or hallways or hair. I wasn't thinking at all. That was the point. Drive, Barnes! Coach yelled from the infield. Don't coast! Fast boys don't coast! So I drove. I crossed the line, bent forward, hands on my knees, sweat dripping off my nose onto the red track. The world pulsed at the edges. Mason collapsed dramatically onto the grass beside me and announced he had died and wanted his funeral to have barbecue. I laughed because it was funny, because I was tired, because it was good to be in a place where pain had rules. Coach read our times off his stopwatch. Mine was the fastest. It usually was. Barnes, that's what I'm talking about, he said. You keep this up. You're going to make people remember your name. Funny thing, names. Back then, I thought having yours remembered was always a gift. After practice, I sat on the bottom row of the bleachers and changed out of my spikes. The sun was low enough to turn the football field orange. A few girls from cross country were stretching near the fence. Somebody's little brother was climbing the railing while his mom yelled at him to get down before he broke his neck. I remember looking toward the school and seeing Davis come out the side doors. She was alone. She had one hand up near her hair, not fixing it exactly, more like checking that it was still there, like Tyler's fingers had left some invisible mark she could feel. She crossed the edge of the parking lot quickly, head down, and followed the sidewalk toward the road. Nobody bothered her. Nobody said anything. I could have called out then. Not an apology. I didn't have the shape of one yet, but something. Hey, you okay? Tyler's an idiot. Anything. My mouth stayed shut. I watched her until she passed behind the buses and disappeared. Mason kicked my shoe. You staring at something? I looked down. No. He smirked. You're weird today. Your face is weird today. Classic Barnes, he said, and tossed a sweaty towel at me. I threw it back. We shoved each other. We laughed. The moment closed over like water. That was another thing I was good at, letting moments close. For weeks after that, Davis kept appearing at the edge of my life. Not because she changed where she was, because I changed where I was looking. She was at the library table during lunch some days, eating pretzels from a Ziploc bag while reading paperback fantasy novels with cracked spines. She was in the office once when I went to drop off a form, standing stiffly beside the counter, while Mrs. Kellerman told her the dress code didn't technically mention hair length for boys, but presentation still matters. She was outside the art room with marker on her fingers, listening while some girl named Heather talked a mile a minute at her. Davis didn't say much, but she smiled once, small and quick, and it changed her whole face. I remember that smile too. I didn't understand why at the time. I just knew it made me feel like I had seen something I wasn't supposed to see. Not because it was wrong, because it was private. Because it proved there was a version of Davis who existed when nobody was hurting her. That version bothered me most. The hurt version was easier, in a terrible way. The hurt version let me feel guilty and then put the guilt away. The smiling version asked something else. It asked who she was when we weren't making her life smaller. It asked, what else? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. Not yet. Knowing would have required me to become someone different. And I was still very comfortable being Riley Barnes. There were 1,000 chances before I took one. That's the part I hate admitting. People like stories where everything changes in one clean moment. A hallway, a shove, a brave sentence. Somebody finally says enough, and the music swells and the world tilts toward justice. My life did not tilt that easily. I saw her. Then I kept seeing her. Then, for longer than I want to forgive myself for, I kept walking around.